This week on Talk by Turner, we're taking a look at the environment, specifically conservation efforts, national parks funding, and the future of the Endangered Species Act under the Trump administration. We're hearing from a former park ranger and writer whose memoirs and fiction meditate on the relationship between humans and nature. Let's get into it. I'm your host, Jeffrey Colon, and you're listening to Talk by Turner. Talk by Turner dives deep into intellectual discovery while examining what's happening in our world right here, right now. Join us each week to hear from industry experts and published authors as they share their knowledge and insight on today's most important topics. Now, let's see who's on this week's episode. We're excited to have Kim Heacox, a former ranger with the U.S. National Park Service, award-winning novelist, and opinion columnist for The Guardian. He lives in Alaska at the entrance to Glacier Bay National Park, and his books have received starred reviews in Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, and Booklist. His books, The Only Kayak and Jimmy Bluefeather, are both winners of the National Outdoor Book Award, and his opinion pieces in The Guardian are written in celebration and defense of the natural world. Kim, welcome to Talk.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to be here.
To start, in your words, why is environmental protection an issue that listeners should care about?
Well, when I first ran across the word environment, I was in college and I thought it was a breath mint. I had no idea what that word meant. I found it cumbersome. I still think it's a cumbersome word, difficult to people to wrap their heads around. So imagine if instead of environment, we said home, right? The natural world being our home, our air, our water, our soil, our livable planet. So let's just say caretaking our home, the Home Protection Agency instead of the Environmental Protection Agency. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the very basic ones are physiological, which means water, air, soil, food. And it's fundamental to our survival and to our well-being, to our mental health. If we have a stable environment, a stable natural world, then we're in good shape. We should be. But if we don't, if we have tornadoes coming once a week now, or fires ripping through the forests of California, I've heard once that every forest in California has either burned or will burn, the way things are going. So it destabilizes our whole world and our well-being, and everything begins to unravel.
So how can people stay informed about divisive and global political topics like climate change without becoming overwhelmed or disengaged?
Well, good question. Misinformation and disinformation are everywhere right now. We have an information crisis. Who to believe? Where does your information come from? It's very tribal, really. You tend to watch and listen to the same sources of information as your friends and your family. That's most often the case. So back away a few steps and ask yourself, how tribal am I being? Am I living in a silo? Do I live in an echo chamber? Do I only want to hear things that appeal to me, things that already affirm the sounds that are already in my head, right? If that's the case, then you're probably being led down a garden path and not really hearing what you should be listening to. In fact, I would say turn off the TV and read. Read as much as you can and read the very best journalism out there. Read The Atlantic, read The New Yorker, The New Republic, read The Guardian. And find those sources of information that are the most highly regarded by the Columbia School of Journalism, for example, which is the whole point behind good journalism is the pursuit of the truth. And that brings us around to science. What's the best thing, Jeff, that humankind has ever devised to arrive at what is true, separate from our own biases, prejudices, and faiths? And that's the scientific method, right? to test and retest, go through peer review and test again to arrive at what's really true. Well, journalism has the same high standards. So only read the very best journalism.
As an author of both memoirs and works of fiction, what place does literature have in the fight to protect our environment and safeguard the diverse kinds of life currently under threat by human actions?
Tremendous role. If you think back to the role of literature, you know, if I could just back up to the 1800s for a moment, there was a whole genre of novels written called plantation fiction, mostly out of the American South, from roughly 1790 through the 1850s. And those novels portrayed the benevolent slave owner and the happy slave and the white girl getting along just fine with the black girl whose father was breaking his back sunrise to sunset every morning out in the fields picking cotton or what have you. Plantation fiction. Oh, isn't it sweet? Isn't it nice? And then along comes Harriet Beecher Stowe in 1852. And she's the first novelist to put the readers in the shoes of a slave. She writes Uncle Tom's Cabin. And it shatters America. Instant bestseller. She's a northerner, of course, and the South freaks out. But that novel, combined with the Fugitive Slave Act and a couple other events, really contributed to young men in the North willing to pick up arms and go fight the South. If you think about it, why did a young man in New Hampshire or Maine, 19 years old, go fight in the Civil War? Well, it's glory. Part of it is glory. All of his friends are doing it. But also, it's moral indignation. The moral indignation of slavery, of one race owning another slave, buying and selling another race. And that novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin, everybody read it. And so literature builds empathy. Especially fiction. It allows the reader to walk in the shoes of other people. The Grapes of Wrath, John Steinbeck's great book about the sharecroppers and the people working in the fields of California, falling over dead. They were working so hard, mostly immigrants from Mexico and Central America. When that novel came out in 1939, Steinbeck got death threats. People were so angry at him. He got on a boat with his friend Ed Ricketts, the marine biologist, and they went down to the Sea of Cortez for a while with their wives. Think about Herman Melville writing Moby Dick. The whole thrust of that novel is man against nature, the machine against nature, and the whale takes its revenge, right? So literature has a massive, important role, and the author has a lot of responsibility. What are you going to write about as an author? You're going to write a happy-go-lucky story about a father and his daughter taking a road trip together or working on a ranch together, and she falls in love with a boy that the father doesn't approve of, etc. And end of story. That's been done 1,000 times before. And I think it's my job as a writer of conscience to address the moral moment where we find ourselves today, because our world is imperiled today by the climate crisis, the biodiversity collapse, and threats to American democracy. And that's why I wrote On Heaven's Hill the way I did, and my next novel, which I'm completing right now. It's my moral obligation to do that. It's just not a right, it's a responsibility.
In your memoir, Rhythm of the Wild, you state the following, quote, "The environment is the economy," end quote. Can you explain what you mean by this? How is the environment intertwined with the economy?
It's very much intertwined with the economy. There's a saying in the insurance industry that nature underwrites the underwriters. So basically the underwriters is the insurance company. So you want to buy a home and you're newly married and you have a child, but you have a good job, but still the home costs $420,000. Well, you get a bank loan, you can put down $35,000 and you can buy the house. You can be living in the house because the bank gives you the loan. Why does the bank give you the loan? The bank gives you the loan because the insurance company is willing to insure you, because the environment is stable, right? Now imagine that sea level is rising 1 inch every 8 years. Now imagine that tornadoes are 10 times more frequent than they used to be, or forest fires, or what have you. So as climate change begins to more and more destabilize our world, the insurance industry is going to pack up and leave town. And when that happens, the economy will collapse. It's already just beginning to happen. And people studying this say that's going to be the first real big impact of the climate crisis on the economy is going to be the collapse of the insurance industry. Or not collapse so much so as they're just leaving town. They're leaving all of southern Florida, or they're leaving all of a certain area of California. What happens, Jeff, when Phoenix, Arizona gets to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, which could happen by the year 2040? They've done scenarios in the hospitals where there could be more than 100,000 people in need of an emergency room in a 2-day period of time. It's coming. So the environment is our entire economy rests and is founded on a stable environment, a stable natural world.
Let's turn our attention to where you live right now, which is Alaska. In 2023, Alaska's national parks generated over $2 billion in economic value to the state. That's according to a report by the National Park Service. However, with tourism's positive economic impacts comes some environmental concerns. The carbon footprint of the tourism sector contributes to 8% of planet heating emissions, and that's expected to rise in the coming years. So my question to you, as an Alaskan resident, what's your take on tourism in the state of Alaska, especially people traveling there to enjoy the natural wonders, while possibly negatively impacting the environment?
That's a really good question. I love to see people coming to Alaska to enjoy wild Alaska. It's a sweet thing. I don't want it to end. I think people's lives are deeply touched and moved by time in nature, right? It resets their clocks. They learn to breathe from the bottom of their lungs. They fall in love again, their children again. It's magic. Nature, the natural world, is our original home. It's where we all come from. It's the oldest church, and it's the oldest university. It's a place of learning, a place of deep spiritual wonder. So I don't want people to stop coming to Alaska. However, I think we need to have caps. We need to put limits. You know, if you go into Carnegie Hall to watch a concert, greatest concert hall in the world, they'll say, well, we're full for tonight, but please, this performer is performing for the next 6 weeks. Please make a reservation for 3 nights from now. We have space available then. So we'd love to have your attendance. We just can't take you right now, type of a thing. They don't take people in Carnegie Hall and shove them into the aisles, stand them along the back row, because it diminishes the experience for everybody, right? It's the tragedy of the commons. So I think we need to do that with our national parks and with visitation to all wild places, all beautiful places, to hold on to the golden goose, right? And not ruin it. So I believe in caps. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's coming. There's even in Juneau, Alaska, it's a little town of 30,000 people that now receive so many cruise ships. 10,000 people, 15,000 people can be walking the streets of Juneau on a big cruise ship day, and just helicopters everywhere flying people from the cruise ships up to the ice field. It sounds like Vietnam in 1968. It's shattering. It's just nerve shattering, the noise, the amount of noise in Juneau. But the businesses keep lobbying for more because they want the money. So they can go live in Mexico all winter after just only working 3 months of the year, or what have you. And I just think the people of Juneau are just asking for 1 day a week. Can we have just 1 day a week when there are no cruise ships? And that has yet to pass. But I think it will in time. Right now, they're getting 1.7 million visitors each summer in Juneau, Alaska. And then from there, they go up to Skagway and around to Whittier, and they get on a bus and they go to Anchorage and up to Denali National Park. And it's the same issues there. Are we ever going to limit this? Well, not so long ago, in the month of July, 1 million people visited Yellowstone National Park in the month of July alone, a couple years ago. And I wrote about that in The Guardian. It's overwhelming. It's a crowding experience, and that's wrong.
Yeah, that actually is my next question to you about the crowding experience. So you're a former park ranger. You've written in The Guardian, as you noted, about crowding problems at national parks and the need for more federal spending to address this. Meanwhile, the budget that the Trump administration recently proposed would cut about $1 billion in funds to the National Park Service. My question to you, what's your reaction to these recent headlines? What do you think the future of the NPS is under the current administration?
I don't know what the future of the National Park Service is under the current administration. I don't think it has ever faced a threat as great as it is facing right now. The first national park, Yellowstone, was created in 1872. And America thought, woohoo, look what we've just done. We have a national park. Nobody else has got one of these. Isn't this cool? It's as original as baseball and bluegrass, right? A national park. And then by 1890, we thought we want a couple more. So we got Sequoia and the beginnings of Yosemite. And then 10 years later, we had Mount Rainier and some other national parks. And then the National Park System, the National Park Service, rather, was founded in 1916, a federal agency to administer this growing family of national parks and national monuments and such. And today, now with the Trump administration, I believe that there are many people in the Trump administration who would like to privatize the national parks and get rid of all public lands. No more public lands. Privatize it all. It's all about enriching people and making money. Everything is a commodity, and I think that's extremely dangerous. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. It's a dangerous time for our public lands. And we could have oil drilling and clear-cut logging everywhere. And trees, my God, you just think about, there's this magic machine out there that pulls carbon dioxide from the air and pumps out oxygen, does everything it can to mitigate our climate crisis, to take out these greenhouse gases and give us fresh oxygen. And those are trees. Trees do remarkable, magical things, especially old growth trees. And to think that we're now going to start cutting them down wholesale is madness. And this goes back, Jeff, to just the denial of the climate crisis. And not only the denial of the science, but active war against the science, because they just don't like what it says. They just don't want it to be true. And that goes back to what is true. Confirmation bias versus critical thinking. And that's where we find ourselves, is in this information crisis and a war on reason, a war on science, a war on public lands. And it's madness. And I'm doing everything I can as an independent writer to stop it. I'm doing everything I can to try to stop this. It's my obligation to write truth to power and try to stop this.
2024 was the hottest year on record. In your opinion, is it possible to reverse this tide on global warming? And if so, what will it take to do so?
Man, isn't that the $64,000 question, right? Can we reverse this? I think we can. We are so ingenious. Maybe there's a 14-year-old girl right now in Arizona who's going to be so inventive, a new Steve Jobs or a new Andrew Carnegie, what have you, who's going to develop a way through chemistry and physics to reverse the carbon buildup in our atmosphere and begin to turn the tide on this. I can't say that's not going to happen. I don't know. I'm not Nostradamus. I don't know what's going to happen, Jeff. Some days I'm optimistic. Some days I'm pessimistic. Last year, Even though renewables are coming on like gangbusters, solar and wind and other sources of clean power, we are still pumping more carbon dioxide into the air last year than we did in any other previous year. So the rate of emissions of CO2, a greenhouse gas, into our atmosphere continue to increase. And part of the danger is that as the atmosphere gets warmer, permafrost begins to melt in the circumpolar north, and that releases tremendous amounts of methane, which is an even vastly more effective greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And so the problem begins to accelerate and compound. So that's what we're up against. We're going to need all our ingenuity, but more so what we're really up against is we need the political will. We need rational thinking.
Focus on the Endangered Species Act. You write a lot about this in your pieces for The Guardian. The Trump administration wants to now redefine what harm means under the Endangered Species Act. Could you explain what this means and the impact you foresee this having on endangered species and the environment as a whole?
Well, to redefine harm will give them in the way they wish to, which basically will read as such, well, hardly anything will be harmful anymore. Toxins and habitat destruction. So it will be free license to go into these places where there are threatened and endangered species and just bulldoze right into there, build a development, cut down some trees, what have you. So they want to basically increase business, increase wealth, allow wealthy people to become even wealthier. And that's how the system works. It's so corrupt that basically these rich people finance the campaigns of these Republican senators and congresspersons, get them in office, and those people turn around and work to take the Endangered Species Act and practically nullify it and give these people license to build their new developments, build a new open pit mine, what have you. And the whole point of the Endangered Species Act is ultimately to preserve a bountiful, beautiful, livable world. And if every time we have these species that are threatened and are disappearing, the act asks us to look around and say, what's going on? Why are these species disappearing? Well, look, you can say 99% of all the species that ever existed on planet Earth have gone extinct. That's true. They have. And they went extinct for all kinds of reasons, volcanism or sea level rise or whatever. I mean, entire continents have moved. And there's been vast changes on planet Earth. It's been much colder. It's been much warmer in the past. I mean, the Earth is 4.56 billion years old. It's gone through a lot. But today, where we find ourselves is that we dominate the world. Humanity so dominates the world today that every species on planet Earth is being held in our hands. We are Lord and Master over it all by our actions. And so if we have these species disappearing, it's important to ask ourselves, is that because there's more dioxin in the air? Is that because of microplastics? Are these species all canaries telling us something? Is the whole world now a coal mine? And every species a canary in that mine? Yes, it is, in effect. So the Endangered Species Act is an alarm clock telling us, be careful, be careful, be careful. And maybe we'll get away with it this generation, and Mr. Businessman will he'll become the next American billionaire. But I think in time the cost will be terrible for his children and grandchildren.
What's your opinion on this? What's more impactful when addressing climate change? Individual grassroots efforts or wide-reaching government policies?
Both. I don't know how I could measure those. I don't know how I could measure that one against the other and really come up with a quantitative answer. Have you heard of movement theory? Movement theory basically says the best way to change the world is everybody working together, doing what they do best, right? Complementing each other and working together. With the Civil Rights Act, with Martin Luther King and John Lewis and such, when they finally got Kennedy and Johnson in the White House, they really began to make strides. And in 1964 and 1965, you got the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, because the grassroots movement of King and Lewis and all the others, working together with a friendly White House, they were able to accomplish a lot. So my answer to that question is both. To really make effective change is to have grassroots movements working together with government. Ansel Adams, the great landscape photographer, once said, "It's horrifying to have to fight your own government to protect the environment, to protect a livable planet." And that's where we find ourselves, especially under this administration. So this is a dangerous time right now. They're rolling back in Washington, D.C., they're rolling back so many environmental protections. No more restrictions on methane. Just let it go, right? Well, good luck with that. It's just going to get hotter and hotter and hotter.
What do you hope that listeners take away from today's episode?
Wake up, wake up. Find out what's really going on. Be grateful for each new day. It's still a beautiful world. But I remember Carl Sagan, the great astronomer. He said, anything else you're interested in isn't going to happen if you can't breathe the air or drink the water. Do something. Don't sit this one out. You are, by accident of fate, alive at one of the most critical moments in the history of our planet. So it's an opportunity, especially for young people, to be the next greatest generation, to step up, be aware, find your tribe, work together. Somebody asked the great climate activist Bill McKibben, they said to him, "What can I do? I'm only one person." And McKibben said, "Stop being one person. Work with others. Find a community. Find a tribe. Develop your skills as a communicator, as a writer, as a speaker, and get out there and get involved and be part of the next greatest generation. The world needs you."
Where can listeners find you online?
I have a website, www.kimheacox.com. I'm pretty active on Facebook and a little bit on Instagram. But I would recommend they go to my website and check me out, and they can write to me via contact on my website, and I'll respond. I respond to everybody I hear from.
Kim Heacox talking to us via satellite from Alaska. Thanks for joining us on Talk by Turner.
Thank you, Jeff.
Enjoying episodes of Talk by Turner? Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe now. Watch us weekly on YouTube, Spotify, or the podcast service of your choice.